Hi, this is Charlotte out here in El Sobrante, California, San Francisco Bay Area, and this week I will be talking about synthesizer modules, the basic points. So starting with the big picture of all of the modules together and then looking at each one in a little more detail, we're going to start with the oscillator, which gives you your initial waveform, your initial tone that you're working with, and then this can be modified by a filter, which affects the frequency, or an amplifier, which is going to change the gain, or an envelope, which is said to shape the sound, which controls the sort of the on and off of the signal, say, as the key is pressed on the keyboard. And then the LFO, or low frequency oscillator, which operates at a much lower frequency than the original oscillator, and that can be used to control, say, for example, the filter and the amplifier or other modules. So starting with the oscillator, this is what gives you your original waveform and sort of your original tone that you're working with. And some of the basic waveforms that we see are the sine, which is a pure tone, single frequency. If you look at a frequency spectrum of this, you see one spike at a particular frequency. The sawtooth wave is going to give you that fundamental frequency added together with the integer harmonics, so it kind of produces a harsher, more shrill or brighter sound. The triangle and the square are both comprised of the odd harmonics, but in the triangle the higher ones drop off a little faster. And then in white noise, you can have a summation of all the frequencies across the spectrum. Then you can use the filter module, or VCF, voltage controlled filter, to change what frequencies you hear. So you could use a low pass filter, which is going to let through frequencies below a certain cutoff and cut out the ones that are above it. The opposite of that is a high pass filter, which is going to allow the higher ones through and cut out the lower ones. Band pass filter is a combination of this. So you're going to cut out, say, your lows and your highs and let through a certain range. And the notch is the opposite of that, where you let through sort of lower and higher frequencies and eliminate a certain range in between. The amplifier, or VCA, voltage controlled amplifier, is going to affect the gain of that signal. So, like in this example here, you'd have your source, run it through your amplifier there, and then it's going to affect the output. Now, in this example here, the VCA can be controlled by another module here, an envelope generator, which would be amplitude versus time here. So this is going to say, okay, we're going to have the signal here, and then it's going to tail off. So that gives that signal to the amplifier, and then you can see the audio output would tail off like that. You could also have this controlled by a low frequency oscillator, which we'll talk about in a moment. The envelope is the module that controls the frequency and the gain of the duration of a note when, say, you press the key on the keyboard and release it. And usually we refer to this as the ADSR envelope, and there are 4 parameters that this includes. The first is the attack, which is when the key is pressed, how long the duration of that phase is. So here it's shown as kind of an exponential, a little bit of a curve, but this can also be linear. So you can change sort of the slope here and the duration here. The next phase is the decay, which is after that key is pressed and held down, what happens to the sound. Here there's kind of an exponential fall off, but it could also be a linear. Then you have the sustain, which is how long that note kind of stays while the key is down. And then you have the release, which is what happens to it after the key is released. So that kind of shapes the sound from the original tone. And then finally you have the LFO, or low frequency oscillator. And now this is oscillating at a much lower frequency than the original oscillator, and it's below the range of human hearing. So while with the original oscillator we might hear the tone that's produced by it, the LFO we're not going to really hear it, but we're going to hear the effects of it if it's used to control something else. For example, you can use it to control the amplifier to get this kind of sinusoidal effect, to get a tremolo sound, or if you hook the LFO up to a filter, you can move around the resonant peak frequency and you get kind of that wah 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 sort of effect. So to recap it all, you have 5 basic modules. The oscillator is going to create your sound. The filter and the amplifier will change the frequency and the gain respectively. The envelope controls what happens when you hit the key and sort of the shape of the sound. And then the LFO, the low frequency oscillator, can be used to control any of these modules in a cyclic fashion. So I hope this helps, and thanks very much for taking the time. Have a good one. Bye.